It is 7 o'clock on a Sunday night, and you know what that means. It's Topical starts right now. A very good evening to South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical, our digital audience with us tonight. It's so good to have them on the program. Looking forward to getting their questions for our guests in a short while. SABC News reporting. The NPA's investigating directorate says it expects to re-enroll Eskom's 2.2 billion rand Kusile Power Station corruption case involving former acting CEO Matshela Koko. On the 21st of November, the Middelburg Specialized Commercial Crimes Court removed Koko's fraud, corruption and money laundering case from the roll due to unreasonable delays. Question: what are the reasons for these unreasonable delays? The capacity and the resources of the NPA to handle intricate cases are being questioned. In the 2020-2021 annual report, Advocate Shamila Batoy said while the COVID-19 pandemic impacted on the ability to process cases, driving down the number of cases finalized, high conviction rates have been maintained in cases that went to trial. Another question: is the NPA fit for purpose to deliver justice to the people of South Africa? State capture cases, highly complex, right? And admittedly will take time to investigate and prosecute. While these processes unfold, to what extent is there a regaining of confidence of the people of South Africa as well as the international community, including investors, regarding the NPA? We will get you some answers shortly. Please note, we did invite the NPA to participate in tonight's discussions, but they weren't available. It's an important discussion though, so we will carry on, right? Which leads us to the question of the week. And we're asking you, what do you make of the NPA's handling of high-profile cases and those linked to state capture? Let us know at It's Topical SABC. Let's walk and talk, get you some context as always. Just how far away is the NPA in terms of ending impunity? How can citizens play a bigger role in making the criminal justice system more responsible or more responsive to the needs of society? Let us know at It's Topical SABC. Perspective coming up. All right, let's get you some context, and as always, let's turn to the magic wall to help us do that. I want to talk about the role and structure of the NPA, instituting criminal proceedings among or on behalf of the state, the National Prosecuting Authority, the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batoy. Again, we did invite them to the program. They weren't available. There are 4 Deputy Directors of Public Prosecutions, right? And you see them here. But the 4th one remains vacant with regards to the total number NPA establishments as of the 31 March 2023. These are the senior management, over 200 senior management services, over 1,600 administration staff, the prosecutors, over 2,700, advocates, 740, right? So this is with regards to the structure and role of the NPA. I want to look at the priority crime areas, right? We're observing 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Conviction rates here at over 74%. Serious and violent crimes, over 79%. Corruption, specialized commercial crimes, 87%. Organized crime, 94%. Right, we will touch on that. Look at the other side of this now, with regards to the priority areas. Cash in transit, robbery, contact killings, economic sabotage, environmental crimes, illicit financial flows, the list goes on, trafficking in persons, TRC matters. this is very important as well. We're going to talk a bit about this with Ahmed Timol's nephew, Imtiaz Kadji. He's joining us on the program tonight. We're going to get a look at where they've come from in terms of pursuing that case. What sort of interactions did they have with regard to the NPA? We will find out. I want to discuss this now with regards to the NPA conviction rate. It's very important. In terms of the High Court, and as you can see here, pretty much high in terms of the numbers, in terms of conviction rates. And these are the years, right? Look at how it flows in terms of the conviction rate. High Courts, 90% in 2019, 2020, 93 the next financial year, 90%, and currently in 2022, 2023, it's sitting at around 89%. In terms of regional courts, 2019, 2020, 82%, 2020, 2021, 82%. So it's all the 80s with regards to the regional courts. Much more success in terms of the district courts, right? In the mid-90s overall here. So that talks to the work that the NPA is doing. I want to talk about something that's in the public domain and of interest to many, the state capture cases and the NPA. With regards to, there was the National Prosecuting Authority established this task force to coordinate the NPA's response to the recommendations and the findings made by the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption and fraud in the public sector, including, as you know, organs of state. You better know it as the Zondo Commission or State Capture Commission. The task force, we understand, is a multidisciplinary committee, and meetings are chaired by Advocate Rodney de Kock, the Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions. There are about 200 or so recommendations from the Zondo Commission Report. We understand that 34 cases are before the courts in terms of state capture. 2 cases have been won so far. We will discuss this ratio, or put it into perspective, this ratio of how favorable is it in terms of the NPA, in terms of the work that they're putting in. We saw the conviction rates in the high 90s with regards to the other cases, but the state capture issues are in sharp focus, right? Context, always important, perspective coming up. Now, on our regular word on the street feature, we took to the streets of Johannesburg, obviously seeking diverse views and insights and perspectives on this topic, and this is what people had to say. Take a look.
NPA at the moment, or at least over the last couple of years or decade or so, I don't think generally there's enough risk when it comes to doing things that are illegal in this country, right, at a political level.
Since the state capture report was released, they haven't prosecuted one, and there's a lot of people there implicated. So at all, they are not effective.
With high-profile cases, I can say, how many cases have they prosecuted so far? Nothing. Or like it's more like, that's why I'm saying the bias, because there's no case that had made quite a good breakthrough, especially under Shamila Pato and all.
No. I'm very disappointed with the way the NPA is handling high-profile cases. And without any doubt, it looks like either they don't have the skills themselves, or alternatively, there is political interference elsewhere.
There's people at the top that keep on getting away with a lot of crimes, like we've seen in the past, and we continue to see currently. So I don't think the NPA is actually doing a good job.
The way the things are done, they are not really transparent, and you can see that there is some political underhand in terms of how they prosecute.
All right, so mixed views, right? But it's important to hear from the people in terms of their perceptions as well. Let's test some of this. Let's start our discussion. We've got lots to cover, short period of time. A number of guests lined up here. Gentlemen, good to see you guys. We have Nkululeko Nconco, attorney at Corruption Watch, Imtiaz Kadji, author, as well as Ahmed Timol's nephew, legal advisor Thabo Masombuka. Great to have you guys on the program. We also have a digital audience as well. They'll be throwing in some questions. So please, if you have any questions, raise your virtual hand and I'll be sure to get you onto the program. All right, first I want to start with you, Mr. Kadji. Let's just set the scene with regards to your uncle, Ahmed Timol. He died on the 27th of October 1971, 4 days after he was arrested at a police roadblock. For those who are not too familiar with this case, but it's important because, and we need context here, get us up to speed with regards to that, the case of your uncle's death.
As you've correctly stated, he was detained at a so-called routine police roadblock. 4 days and 18 hours later, police claimed that he jumped to his death from the 10th floor of the John Foster Square police station, now renamed Johannesburg Central Police Station. An inquest was opened in 1972. Magistrate de Villiers found that my uncle had committed suicide, but that nobody was responsible for his death. Ahmed Timol was the 22nd person to have died in police detention. Many others were to follow. And Lux Martin Dluli was the first to have died in 1963.
Right.
We then fast forward to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 1996, where my maternal grandmother testified, obviously begging and asking for somebody to be held accountable for my uncle's death. Nothing transpired at the TRC. Her wish to have a school renamed after Uncle Ahmed, who was an educator, was granted. But on the front of truth and justice, nothing transpired. I found out in 2001 from the TRC investigator, P.S. Pichot, that he had actually interviewed João Rodrigues. Now, Rodrigues was the last person in the room with my uncle when he allegedly jumped to his death. And Pichot had recommended in his file that the TRC subpoenas Rodrigues. But there's no explanation as to why the TRC did not subpoena Rodrigues, because Rodrigues and all the other security branch officers involved in my uncle's arrest, detention, and I believe my death never applied for amnesty, nor were they subpoenaed. In 2002, 2003, Blaine, I wrote to the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Nkululeko Nconco, telling him that I had ascertained that a number of police officers were still living, including Johannes Henry Gloy and Johannes van Niekerk, who were senior interrogators in my uncle's matter, and I asked him to reopen the matter. Parallel to that, I spoke to Advocate Chris McAdam, who was head of the Priority Crimes Litigation Unit. I provided some information to him, including a note that I found in the TRC file of some allegations made by Rodrigues' daughter. Advocate McAdam responded to me that an investigating officer was appointed. They followed up with Ivor Powell, who was a journalist who had allegedly made this claim to Pichot. When approached, he denied the allegation. And Advocate McAdam requested me to provide further information so that the matter can be looked into. I then found out in 2006 that the NPA had closed the matter, like many other cases that were closed in 2006, until October 2016, when I had provided a docket to the Foundation for Human Rights, and with the legal team we prepared a case. We made an application to the then NDPP Sean Abrams to revisit the Timol matter. And in October 2016, he announced the reopening of the Ahmed Timol inquest. Fast forward in 2017, on the 30th of July 2018, the Ahmed Timol inquest was reopened. But the NPA had reopened the Timol inquest on the view that all the security officers had passed on. And what had transpired was that a few weeks before the reopening of the inquest, I received an email from Rodrigues' daughter, Tilana Standa, who told me that Rodrigues was living. And on that basis, he was subpoenaed and he testified at the inquest. So if Rodrigues' daughter did not reach out to me, Rodrigues would have watched the reopening of the 2017 inquest from the comforts of his home. And the question would have had to be asked, why did the NPA and the DPCI not do a thorough investigation to ascertain that Rodrigues was living?
So it's been Rodrigues has since passed away. It's been a 20-year journey, over 20-year journey for you in trying to bring some sort of justice for your family. How would you describe the impetus or the willingness from the NPA to prosecute such cases?
Look, there's absolutely no doubt that since 2002, when the final TRC reports were handed over to the government of the day for them to institute investigations and prosecutions, very little transpired. And that is why the reopening of the Timol inquest in 2017 was unprecedented, because it was the first case. But since then, we do have the reopening of the Neil Agat case, the Ernest Dipali case, the Dr. Hussein Hafiji case, and the matter of Imam Harun. So there has been progress. And that progress has predominantly appeared in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Under the leadership of Advocate Rodney de Kock, he reached out to us in the Apartheid-era Victims Family Group for us to work with investigators and prosecutors and Director of Public Prosecutions in the different provinces where our families reside. So we have a close working relationship with them, because we've realized that is the only way for us to get justice in this democratic South Africa, for us to work within the system.
Nkululeko, listening to what Imtiaz Kadji is saying regarding his uncle's case, and then you couple it with the Matshela Koko case that we heard on the 21st of November. How would you describe the handling, or the NPA's handling of the Koko case?
I'd describe it as quite disappointing in that it seems that the NPA has been, due to public pressure, in a rush to start prosecutions before it was adequately prepared. And this is a repeat of what happened earlier in the year as well, where it seemed that the NPA wasn't adequately prepared to begin its prosecution, where the general mechanisms or machinery of the criminal justice system hadn't worked together to gather the evidence adequately and ensure that it's up to the standard that will be required to prosecute a matter in any court.
Right. Thabo, a couple of years ago, I was reading a quote from Advocate Shamela Batoy, saying that we need to strive for high conviction rates, but never at the expense of justice. What's your understanding, if you had to take within the Koko case context there?
Well, thank you. Good evening, and good evening to your viewers at home. There is a problematic pattern and a phenomenon in South Africa in the administration of criminal justice system, that police arrest to investigate, when in fact the contrary should be the case. You investigate adequately, sufficiently, and then arrest on the strength of the case before you. But what happened in the Matshela Koko case and many other cases which are thrown out of the court on a daily basis based on technicalities, it must not be confused with acquittal or withdrawal of the charges. I think it's very important. But there is a little bit of a blind catch here, because the moment the public views this striking of the roll in their ongoing pattern, the public then start to doubt the credibility of the NPA's ability to prepare a case and bring them before court. But it's because of that problematic phenomenon I mentioned before.
So it's perception, right? Whether it's fair or not, that's a different story.
Remember, there's a legal principle in law that says justice must not be done. It must manifestly seem to be done. So in other words, in the eyes of an ordinary man and woman, they must see that there is a consistent application of justice. You see the problem that the NPA has, because it would also be unfair and simplistic, quite simplistic, to suggest that they have not really sufficiently been effective. Otherwise, the jails would not be overflown. Otherwise, the jails will not be overcapacitated. So there is some relative amount of progress as courts convict people, and that should be accredited to the NPA's ability to successfully pursue conviction. But there is no consistency. We are yet to see, especially in the economic crimes, we are yet to see the people involved in the VBS scam, for instance, brought before court. We are yet to see the criminal prosecution of the biggest stain of corporate scandal. We are yet to see the pursuit of criminal charges against some companies that were involved in the 2010 collusions and price fixing. Because in economic law, those are contraventions of the law, of tax regimes, manipulation of price. We have just recently seen banks being found to have manipulated the rent. It's not enough to say they will pay the fine and we move on, because economic crimes, as high-profile crimes, have got a huge, significant negative impact on the ability of South Africans to sustain themselves economically.
Look, when we talk about high-profile cases like the Koko case, perception, as you say, is key. We've seen, in terms of the high conviction rates with other cases, that's not in the public eye. But I guess those high-profile cases allows the NPA, if convicted or if they win, to build confidence within society, and that's important. We did, as you know, invite the NPA. They weren't available, but we managed to get a clip with regards to the NPA talking about the Koko matter as well as other state capture cases. Take a look.
I think I need to caution the public. For starters, corruption, getting us here, did not take or happen overnight. It took lots of time, lots of planning, lots of this and that. So with that same breath, in order to be able to bring people to court, in order to be able to formulate charge sheets and essentially indictments to be ventilated in our higher courts, it does take time because of the complexities, the systems, the enablers, and those that are basically doing those things. So we will not be putting a time frame or putting any further pressure on the investigating directorate until we have then remedied the issues that the magistrate says that we must look into. So we're going to study the judgment, shall abide by it, and then we'll take it from there.
We also have reaction from Matshela Koko regarding this matter. All right, do we have that clip? All right, we'll play that.
Justice cuts both ways. There are serious allegations. Justice cuts both ways. There are serious allegations made by the state against me. The public expects that these allegations must be answered. I think we're taking South Africans for a ride. The National Prosecuting Authority is doing South Africans a big disservice. You can't make such allegations, investigate them for more than 5 years, bring me to court, wake me up at 6 o'clock in the morning. More than 12 months later, you're not ready to give me to go to trial. What we see here is hate crime. What has happened to me and my family is nothing else but hate crime. It's a hate for Koko. You might as well take the Eskom chapter of the State Capture Commission and throw it in the bin. Throw it in the bin. It means nothing. South Africans have been taken for a ride here.
Matshela Koko there. Nkululeko, when you listen to Mr. Koko, and given the fact that a lot of these state capture cases are highly complex and it needs time to investigate and to prosecute, are our expectations as the public, general public, reasonable with regards to the pace of the prosecutions?
So the very first step, I think, was the transparency that we obtained from the State Capture Commission, which was initially meant to take a much shorter period of time than what it did. So I think having that in mind, one then realizes how complex these matters are and how much more time we might need. We also need a level of resourcing, both human resources and financial resources, to ensure that there's adequate support for the NPA and for the investigators, and that the relevant technical skills are also available and are being utilized. So part of our view is that we shouldn't, although there is public pressure to ensure that these matters are prosecuted as speedily as possible, but to also not take shortcuts, as it were, to ensure that there is adequate investigation, to ensure that the matters will be properly before a court, and that we won't either be seeing discharges where the state hasn't had a prima facie case that it's shown to the court, or where then keeps postponing for further investigation, because in the ideal world, you're only going to bring a matter to court when you're sufficiently ready to prosecute it. So effectively, we do need to give the NPA some latitude in terms of time, but not in terms of what we expect as the outcome and as the level of skill and accuracy in their prosecution.
All right, let's take it to the digital audience. I see hands up already. Mohau, Donald, you have your hand up. Let's unmute. Let's hear your thoughts. If you can unmute, Mohau. There we go.
I'm here. Thank you so much, Blaine. I just want to ask this question. How complex are these cases? How complex are they? Because it doesn't really make sense for the NPA to really do all the work. And when we think that they should be doing something that is meaningful, they are taking it out of court. How complex are these cases? And are we likely perhaps to see the NPA outsourcing some of these cases to other institutions that are well capacitated, institutions that have all the resources to take these matters forward? How complex are these state capture cases? That's my question for now.
Thanks. Thabo, let's throw that to you with regards to the complexities of this.
Yeah, the contravention of economic, crimes in general, it's a fairly complex matter, which requires, like Nkululeko said, a adequate capacitation of forensic specialists, of investigative specialists that are skilled in various areas of the law to bring these court and these commercial cases before court because you don't just rush into bringing a corruption or commercial or even fraud cases. You must make sure that your chances of successful prosecution exist. However, there's nothing wrong with outsourcing, but there's a risk. You see, you need to be careful. The responsibility of the NPA is to uphold the Constitution. So in other words, in their pursuit for criminal justice, they must also balance that against the constitutional right that are provided for in the value system of the Constitution. You would have heard the like of Matshela Koko saying that he's been subjected to this. There is nothing wrong with being investigated and being charged. But you need to be provided an adequate opportunity to have your day in court so that you can respond to the charges leveled against you. That's why I'm saying if the case is thrown out based on technicality, it is not necessarily legal victory per se. However, if you have an NPA that outsources a significant portion of its work, you're likely to see what is called a reverse capture, because there will be those who have got direct and substantial interest in those cases, and they may want to influence as a process, and that's the risk you do not want to take.
Imtiaz, I mean, with regards to, you mentioned some of the cases that the NPA is now willing to take on of late, and your dealings with them, with regards to the skills and capacity that they have. Do you have confidence in the institution? Do you have trust in the institution?
We've got absolutely no other option but to work with them. I mean, I've been the #1 critic of the NPA since 2003, because if they had thoroughly investigated our cases in 2003, when the majority of perpetrators were living, we would have seen justice in our lifetime. And you know the saying, justice delayed is justice denied. And the reality is, I came to the conclusion that I don't have a choice. And I raised the concern because what we're sitting with former Apartheid-era investigating officers, now investigating the crimes committed by their former colleagues. Former prosecutors who work for the apartheid regime are now prosecuting. And there are some progressive, and they must be commended. Those that are progressive, those that have delivered. But without a doubt, there are many, many others who still belong to the so-called old guard, who go out of their way to ensure that these matters are destabilized, who ensure that we don't have access to Apartheid-era archives, who ensure that there are lengthy delays. The Rodriguez matter, he got charged on the 30th of July 2018 only because of the DPP Andrew Chauke. For 6 months, the docket was moved up and down between Pretoria and Johannesburg. DPP Chauke set up a team. Within 3 months, a decision was made. And when Rodriguez was charged, the state was ready to commence a criminal trial. Witnesses were identified, statements were taken. And what transpired is that the Constitution, Rodriguez used the Constitution to defend himself. And for 3 years, the criminal justice system came to a standstill between the full bench of the South Gauteng High Court, the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, till eventually his passing in September 2021 when the Constitutional Court removed the matter of the criminal rule. And I'm convinced that this was a deliberate ploy by the criminal justice system to make sure that this matter does not get heard. Because the allegations made by his legal counsel was that there was a secret amnesty deal between the ANC and Nationalist Party. This is apart from the TRC. Chris McAdam, the head of the Priority Crimes Litigation Unit, only in 2018, 2019 now talks of political interference that prevented him from doing his work. He remained silent since 2003.
Nkululeko, I mean, it's strong allegations, right, if it was a deliberate attempt. With regards to the Sunday Times' reporting that the NPA is staring down the barrel of budget cuts, etc., aspirant prosecutors trying to get into the system, if that is the case, if that reporting is accurate, what would that mean in terms of what, to Imtiaz's point, getting new prosecutors into the system, motivated and willing to take on such big cases?
Unfortunately, it's not the first time that the aspirant prosecutor program has had significant budget cuts.
Yeah.
This happened about 10 or so years ago as well. And I think that was part of the project of state capture to ensure that there were fewer new prosecutors and fewer people available to do prosecutions. So we're seeing that again. I don't think it's necessarily part of the same pattern, but it is a huge risk in that you're not getting more people trained, and you're not going to get more people trained, I think, as specialized commercial crimes prosecutors. Yeah. And you're also not going to get enough of a variety or of skills or interests within the NPA if that keeps being the pattern. So you might end up having enough of whatever older guard there is that remain active within the NPA. And by old guard, I don't mean necessarily people who were there before 94, but different people with different ways of viewing the matters on their desks. And I think you do need the fresh blood or people who are more inspired to prosecute certain types of matters.
Thabo?
Just a quick one. In fact, you need, whether or not it's old or new guard, you need integrity, professionalism, and clear sense of ethics in the NPA. You know, an example of the clumsiness of the NPA is better seen in the sense of Mayor case. That's a typical example of the clumsiness of people.
In what way?
Or the underhandedness in the decision making. Because prosecutorial decisions are decisions in law. At some point, we had two dockets. That's an anomaly that's completely unacceptable in a country which is supposed to have adequate, transparent NPA that pursued cases without any fear or favor. Why did we have two dockets? So it tells you that at some point, someone wanted to influence the direction of the prosecution. So at some point, someone within the higher echelons of the NPA could have been captured to influence the clumsiness so that there's a loss of credibility. Because remember, once a matter gets to court, because of the constitutional values, the court is entitled to make sure that justice is pursued objectively, without any fear, without any favor. And once there's an indication that there was third-party interference, courts are more likely to throw cases out of court.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about the measures that should be put in place in order to prevent this and guard against this. I'll come back to you in that in a short while. Let's go back to the digital audience. Molatelo, let's hear from you. If you can unmute Molatelo. There you go.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes. I think I have two statements or two comments and two questions. My first comment would be, I think our whole legal system, our whole NPA system needs to be overhauled. Like the previous speakers have been saying, we need, credible leaders or credible a legal system, and we need, it to be overhauled so that it can deal with matters as and when they arrive. You know.
In what way do you think it should be overhauled?
I think, our legal system that we are currently using, and I'm no legal expert, I'm not speaking under an expert advice here, but the current legal system that we see in our country is, I can almost say that it's sort of limited by our constitution, because there are there's a culture of impunity and patronage where people can use the legal system and tweak it, in order for them not to be prosecuted or in order for them not to be investigated, and so forth. So I think if we can look into that and look into sort of amending or overhauling it so that even for normal normal South African, the legal system is fair and just, I think we'll be making significant progress. And then now my question would be, what mechanisms are in place to ensure that the investigations are done impartially and they are independent? And then my second question is, how does the NPA ensure that the investigations, especially within politically sensitive cases, are done independently and without prejudice? Because I believe that, like I said, with the culture of impunity and people believing that they are untouchable, I believe that there's a lot of challenges that we're facing as normal South Africans, because in one way, when you look at it, you see that a lot of cases just blow up. People are just taking cases up, and then what happens afterwards is that they do it for show. They go and arrest people for show, and then after that, the cases disappear into thin air. And then you hear that someone has been redeployed as an ambassador to Kazakhstan or any of these other countries. So I think we need to sort of get constant reporting and constant feedback as South Africans to understand where we're going with our legal system.
I want to get you some answers straight away. We need to take a break, but let me get that answer for you. Let's go to Thabo. I remember when the National Director of Public Prosecutions in February 2019, the words she used during an interview for the position, she said, was the NPA is akin to a house on fire. I wonder, all these years later, to what extent has she managed to douse the flames of this fire and, to Molatelo's point, put up some guardrails in order to make sure that investigations are done in an impartial way?
Yeah, remember she took over for a lack of a better word, a captured NPA. There were factions there in the NPA. There were those who believed in a status quo, retention of the status quo, what Imtiaz refers as the old guard, who really couldn't really pursue justice against their former friends and colleagues. And there were those new ones who came in with a sense of agency, sense of professional integrity. But in the process, they were frustrated by decision makings. There's a hierarchy there. And they couldn't override certain decisions. Others left. I know friends with whom I served articles, with whom we got admitted, who went to join the NPA, but they had to leave because they were frustrated by decision making, they were frustrated by manipulation, they were frustrated by all sorts of unethical behavior. So she has got a huge, difficult responsibility, but she can't do that without the likes of Imtiaz, who must then take not the law into their own hands, but initiate processes, act as pressure groups. And this is a sense that I get from the likes of Corruption Watch. So we must see more and more of such activist NGOs taking up these responsibilities, understanding the law. As you could say from Molatelo, there's a sense of public discontent and unhappiness at the rate in which these prosecutions take place. And therefore it leads to the discredit of the NPA. So they must do more advocacy, do more engagement, but the more of NGOs that we see taking up these constitutional processes and taking up these rights, the more likely we'll see some improvement there.
And it talks to your point with regards to perceptions. And how it plays out in the public sphere. All right, we need to take a quick break. Remember, please note that we did invite the NPA to this program. They weren't available, but we endeavored to try to get their comments. It's an important topic to discuss, so we're pushing on. We're getting your perspective. How do you see the NPA's handling of high-profile cases as well as the state capture cases? Let us know at It's Topical SABC. Quick break. Get you more next. Welcome back. We are looking at the NPA's handling of high-profile cases as well as state capture cases as well. We've got a panel of experts here as well, and our digital audience who want to give their input with regards to perceptions as well. Perspective from their point of view, how they see the NPA handling these cases. Let's take it to the digital audience. Let's speak to Sascha. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you so much.
Go ahead. Your thoughts on the NPA's handling of these high-profile cases?
I'm not happy personally because we live in a failed security ruled by incompetent people, and most of those people that are ruling us, they are thieves themselves. So we are suffering as South Africans. If we can look at the case that is related to billions of rands, most of those cases are Eskom. We're at stage 6 as South Africans where they don't care. The NPA, after a year, you're coming back, you're not ready to take up a case while people are suffering. Where now you live in suburbs, you're sorted in life with everything, you don't even have load shedding. We are living in villages, like we're struggling, we're suffering. If I can go for 2 months if I can go for 2 days without electricity, what's going to happen? Are you going to provide me with the meal that I bought? Are you going to provide me with everything that I need? Because we can't live without electricity. So I'm highly disappointed. And since they're also not here to give their input or tell us what's happening, I'm highly disappointed.
Efficiency is the name of the game, isn't it, in order to be effective on the ground. Talent, let's hear from you.
Greetings to the panel, and thank you for having us on the show. And my submission would be that I am very disappointed in the NPA in particular, for the fact that I feel like they are biased and ignorant to prosecuting blatantly guilty state capture criminals, and mostly who are members of the ruling party. I feel like they are very lenient on them, and hence they can have the audacity to actually remove cases off the roll and tell us that no, the trial period, and tell us all this big English that doesn't make sense. At the end of the day, we are the public, we are a democratic country, we are the people who put the ruling party in the position where they are in. We voted for them, but we didn't vote for them so that they can play with our minds and manipulate us and not do what they're expected to do. So I feel like there needs to be a job description session for the National Prosecuting prosecutors, because something is not right. Something is not going well. We cannot have 34 cases and only win 2, and of which those 2 apparently is cases that were struck off the roll. So how does that make us have confidence in a structure that doesn't win anything? And there are 200 recommendations, but none of those recommendations has been put to place. So how are we to have confidence in the NPA? As an individual and as a South African, as a voter who is supposed to vote in 2024, I have no confidence in the current state, and I have no confidence in the National Prosecuting Authority. Thank you.
Talent, firmly stating her point. Motonzi, let's hear from you, if you can unmute.
Thank you, sir. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear, go ahead.
Thank you also for having me. I would like to say that...
Devices. Yeah. Matonzi, if you could switch off one of your devices.
Off now.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yes, sorry about that. I wanted to say that the NPA is quite incompetent, and also them not showing up to this session today, it clearly indicates that they do not take anyone serious, they do not take the public serious, and they do not have any accountability within themselves, because they should be in a position whereby when you are being called, come and respond on your behalf, and what other difficulties probably that they might be having, of which they cannot right now be able to disclose them because they are nowhere to be found. So in that, I'd really also like to say, I don't know if the NPA is really independent, or it might be influenced by any political influence or whatsoever, because the way they conduct themselves, it really shows that there is an upper hand upon them and they are no longer operating in their own independent state. So also with that being said, I have really no confidence in the NPA, unfortunately, because you can actually see that the only cases that are taken serious, or the cases that have high convictions rate, are the cases of ordinary South Africans. Those that have access to resources, they don't get to be banned by the fineness of the law. They get the liberty to do whatsoever, and they do not, and they've never been convicted. Only those that have access to resources or have money are the ones that are able to be acquitted every time they go to a court of law. So now the question comes back to say, is it really justice, or is it influence? Right. Is it money? What actually determines the fruitfulness of a particular case? So those are the things that we really are puzzled with, and unfortunately they're not here to respond for themselves. So I hope the panel will be able to shed some light. Thank you so much.
Nokutula, thank you very much indeed. Nkululeko, is it fair criticism? I mean, strong words being used. Incompetent, people are disappointed, no trust with regards to the NPA, some. But you've seen their conviction rates with regards to the High Court, regional district cases that they prosecuted, high 90s, etc. Is it fair criticism?
The criticism of incompetence, I don't think overall for the NPA is fair. And I think we also need to be aware that the NPA doesn't operate in isolation. It's a criminal justice system, and the prosecutors rely on investigators. Some are within the NPA, and others are in the SAPS to provide them the information that will then they prosecute on. So the entire criminal justice system needs to work in concert and be more effective. And generally, the failing in our view is at the investigation stage more than the prosecution stage. Right. And we wouldn't really say that the NPA is incompetent. Yes, they could do better, but they're certainly not incompetent. What they should be doing is ensuring that there's greater public trust and that we can generally see that they are acting with integrity, prosecuting without fear, favor, or prejudice, so that people all feel that they are equal before the law and that they will be heard effectively.
Imtiaz, I mean, how concerned are you with regards to botch-ups at the investigating stage, prosecutorial stage, in order that impacts the NPA's goal of ending impunity?
It's a very critical question. We should not forget, I think, as Nkululeko has mentioned, the focus obviously is on the NPA, but the NPA cannot prosecute successfully without solid investigating work. And the challenge that we have with TRC cases, we're looking at 30, 40, 50-year-old cases. And the reality is there political will? And again, we need to ask the questions, because there are many, without a doubt, sitting in political office. It's not in their interest for these matters to be reopened, because in one way or the other, they were implicated in compromise for working with the apartheid regime. So for them today, to see these matters being reopening is very worrying. And that is why we find some of them coming, testifying at reopen inquests, but you'll never hear them talking about questioning as to why there was no justice at the TRC, why there was no post-TRC prosecutions. On the issue of impunity, well, I'm of the view that impunity was planted during the negotiated settlement. Big business and capital were given a free license during the TRC to say, continue with what you've done without being held accountable. And we put apartheid-era crimes on Ferdi Barnard and Eugene de Kock, where the likes of Rolf Meyer, who was the Deputy Minister of Police and was in the army, is today our hero. So we need to go back and we need to revisit our history. And that is why it is very important that TRC cases do not get marginalized. Capacity and resources be given. Public support continues for these cases to be heard, because apartheid-era killers need to be held accountable. And finally, I'm of the view that there's a direct link between corruption that is playing out today and apartheid crimes that were committed with impunity.
Thabo, from the moment a crime is committed, all available evidence and information needs to be collected, protected. it's not always the case, as you know. Things go wrong. How can we close the gap in terms of a better workflow between the SAPS, South African Police Services, as well as the NPA?
Yeah, maybe back to the question by the digital viewers. If you were to ask me whether or not there's incompetence in the NPA, my answer would be yes and no. And I know that may sound a little bit like a chicken and an egg, which one comes first. But here's the thing. No, in the sense that it's unfair to cast aspersions on the NPA holistically.
Correct.
Because like I said earlier, otherwise the jails would not be, overflowing. There has been some progress in the prosecution of some violent crimes whatsoever, GPV, domestic violence, all those things. However, that's where the yes comes in. It is a level of inconsistency in the pattern of investigation and prosecution of high-profile commercial and economic crimes that makes the viewers
What contributes
so
to that inconsistency?
Let's remember, and our fellow panelists have already said, the proper administration of justice is dependent on 5 elements. Very critical, interlink and overlapping. First, the capability of the police who arrest, after investigating and investigate adequately, bring the docket to court, to a prosecutor who understands the charges, who understand the interpretation of the law, and who's going to bring it to a court with a prima facie evidence that. And then thirdly, it's a role of the lawyers and legal representative of the accused persons, whose role, by the way, is not to defend criminals, whose role is to ensure that in the pursuit of this case, the constitutional rights, the law is adequately carried out. And fourthly, it's the magistrates and the judges who must ensure that the court arrives at an appropriately legal and lawful conclusion. So that if people are convicted, then there's a 5th role player, which is a correctional service system, where these people are sent to prison to be rehabilitated. And if they are released earlier, like Oscar Pretorius now, who get a parole and all of them, they are parolees who are monitored in accordance with the parole system. So those 5 elements, if any of them is captured and compromised, then we have a problem. And that's where the sense of the public seems to have the little bit of discontent, because there is a leakage in the system.
Yeah. How do we increase consistency, Imtiaz? How does the NPA become fit for purpose?
Well, I can tell you what we're doing is that we're working with them. We monitor those cases. We without interfering, very important, without interfering in their cases. But we work closely with them. We are supportive. We want to assist them to fast-track investigations and so forth. And they know that we are watching. So that unlike the past where we just get told investigations are ongoing for eternity, there's progress reports that have been given, and there's a structure. From the investigating officer, prosecutor, we've got coordinators at the NPA, at the DPCI, we've got the DPPs that we've got access to, we've got the Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions we have direct access to. So there are checks and balances that have emerged in the last 2 years.
Right.
And that must be supported. Because we as families, we've got absolutely no other alternative. And that is why my message to those investigators and prosecutors is very clear. That if you think for a second that you're going to protect your brothers and sisters from the apartheid regime, we are watching and we are monitoring. And we are going to ensure that those cases are fast-tracked, there is progress, and our families get justice in their lifetime.
Nkululeko, final word to you.
We need to see that the NPA has adequate resources, both financial, human resources, that the people appointed to the NPA are people of integrity, and that the required skills within the skills gaps that have been identified are filled, and I think that will then help us a great deal in ensuring that the matters that need to come before court do come before court and are ready to be before the court.
It's a pity that we don't have the NPA here to answer for themselves, but I think it was instructive to look at the perspectives in all sides of the coin in order to get to that better place that everybody, including our digital audience, wants us to go to. Digital audience, thank you very much indeed for your contributions. Time is never on our side. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Instructive as always. All right, before we go, here's my take. Crime takes a huge toll on its victims, right? Be it physical, emotional, even financial. And you expect prosecutors prosecution of those responsible for unashamedly stealing from you, who hurt your family, who hurt this country. Those expectations are not unreasonable. And the dictum, as you heard being said here, justice must not only be done, but must also be seen to be done, rings true. It lends legitimacy or veracity to the fight against crime. But I want to look at it from another perspective, a more sustainable one. We need to have clear eyes about alternatives, right, given the state of play. Treating the source rather than fixing the symptom. Taking a deeper dive into the causes of corruption and the responsibility we have as citizens in speaking out and helping strengthen cases that eventually land up in court. The aspect of moral responsibility in the name of progress and a better life for you and your family. Strong civil participation is key. As author Abhijit Naskar puts it, try a crime, you end a criminal. Treat an environment, and you end crime. And that's my take. If you miss anything, be sure to watch this episode of YouTube, of It's Topical on YouTube, Sports Live up next. If you watch a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.